the show of the week.
Hello! Welcome! I'm glad you're all here. I'm here. Thank you all for being my guinea pigs. I'm trying out some swanky new software, so who knows, the whole thing may go totally pear-shaped this time around, but I think you should be hearing me, and I think you should be seeing me, and I think this should all be working. This is our... what month is it? This is our May show of the month. We're talking about Tony nominee Waitress the musical. These show of the months are wonderfully... Wait, I want to do this thing. All right, I got this thing. You ready? These show of the months are wonderfully sponsored by my patrons on Patreon. If you want to become a patron on Patreon, if you are watching this in the future and you want to be part of the future shows of the month, just go to patreon.com/musicalmash and you can pledge some money, and then you can vote on the show, you can help choose the date, and you can be a part of these as they happen live and be involved in the chat like all these wonderful people are now. See, wasn't that swanky? Wait, here, watch. Ooh, isn't this fun? I think this is fun. Also, just a couple more quick disclaimers. I'm very happy to see you all. The world is going a little crazy today. I got C-SPAN on in the background because I'm kind of a political junkie in my off time. This is not a political channel. We're not going to talk about that, but if I seem a little distracted now and again, that's what's going on. And they say in Chicago today, it's supposed to hail and there's supposed to be gale force winds. So if I suddenly disappear because my power went out, I'm glad we got to spend this time together that we did. But enough formalities, enough about the silly stuff. Let's talk about fun things. Let's talk about Waitress. Let me tell you about this musical. I think this showed in my discussions with Jimmy on the Tony's podcast, which I rushed real fast to get out. I didn't expect to like this show. I saw the movie Waitress in college. We rented it one night, me and all my friends, and we watched the whole thing, and I fell asleep during it. I don't think there was anything particularly wrong with it. It was just not my kind of movie and not very engaging. And, as I'm sure all of you know, I have a long-standing and perhaps less and less justified grudge against franchise musicals and musicals that are adapted from movies, which seem kind of disingenuous. And so I didn't expect to like this musical, and I really do. In preparation for this, I've listened to this show maybe I think I've listened to it 4 or 5 times today alone, and it is just nice and relaxing and soothing to listen to. Sara Bareilles is a pop star who, I'm a musical theater nerd. I don't listen to music outside of Sondheim. And Sara Bareilles somehow made it into my circle of knowledge. And I really like her music and was interested to hear how this all panned out when I put that together. And man, her stuff really shines in this show. A lot of times with pop stars, and I think I mentioned this in the show of the day for the Tony, so my apologies if I'm repeating myself, but with pop stars and when you get a big name writing music for a show like this, oftentimes they fall into the trap of just recreating the stuff that made them popular on the radio and in the charts. And I don't think that happened with this show. I was watching a bunch of interviews with Sara Bareilles about this show and talking about the process and the creation and how these songs came to her and how they entered her life, and she just seemed so honest and just wonderfully moved that she was invited into this community to do this sort of thing, which was really neat, and I think shows in her music. This is not just a recreation of a Sara Bareilles pop album brought to the stage. It's clear that some real thought went into how this musical pieces itself together, which is really cool and really I like that, I've talked before about how first and foremost musical theater is a business, and it's nice when you hear of people who are brought into it with seemingly very business motivations, still clinging very hard to their artistic core and their artistic driving. And I think that's absolutely happening with Waitress. What else? I've got a whole bunch of notes here. I have, you can see none of it, but there is so much technology in front of me. It's like, I feel like I'm driving a spaceship. It's a little crazy. What do I got here? So one of the things, and this surprised me really early on about Waitress. So it had Boston tryouts, I think late last year, maybe. August, so summer of last year at American Rep in Massachusetts. Pardon me, not Boston. And so it had already been tried out, and then it announced its Broadway run. So they have some time. They already have their, set core of what the show is, and they're moving to Broadway. And, you can take as much or as little time in renovating the show and figuring that all out before you bring it to Broadway. And so there's a lot of politics in when you want to open a Broadway show as it relates to when the season starts. And really, when the season starts is a lot determined by what the Tony's cutoff date is, right? Because that makes sense. The Broadway version of Waitress opened on April 24th, and the cutoff for Tony nominations was April 28th. So 4 days. If they had, done 4 more days of previews or started their previews 4 days earlier, they would be in this next round of shows in this next season. And on the one hand, who cares, right? The Tony Awards are great, but shouldn't be the end-all be-all of your art. But on the other hand, there's a lot to be said about the business implications of winning a Tony Award and being nominated for a Tony Award. All of this to say that if Hamilton hadn't existed in this season, there was probably a pretty good chance that Waitress might have won. I mean, it seems the very presumptive runner-up for new musical this year. And, Hamilton swept, excluding revivals, and in categories where revivals and new musicals competed. So no other new musical beat out Hamilton in any Tony Award. And I wonder if Waitress had waited 4 more days to open, they could be the best musical of the 2016-2017 season. And we'll never know, and it also doesn't matter. But I wonder what the motivations are behind that. Did anyone think about that when they were deciding the opening date? Did, they decide if they waited this long, maybe the musical would lose some of the magic and fun being open for so long before the Tonys happened? They would want to keep all of the, original performers in it for as long as possible through the Tony Awards, which that's a long contract of almost a year. It's interesting to me that that was the choice they made. In my secret imaginative world, I like to imagine that, they were happy to be nominated for the Tony Awards, but, don't much care and are happy to create this interesting piece of art that they're working on. It's just, man, Tony Awards this year were wonderful, absolutely wonderful, and very moving, for a whole host of reasons. And Sara Bareilles and Jesse Mueller's performance were definitely one of the most heartfelt, moving moments of the show, of the Tony Awards for me. Even more so than Hamilton, because I think, man, I hope this... my apologies if this turns into the comparing Waitress to Hamilton live stream. Something... It's really... I'm clearly having problems articulating it. We have reached a point of Hamilton saturation where you've seen it all and you've listened to it all too much. And Waitress is new. It came out in April, and the soundtrack has only been out for cast album, working on it. Old habits die hard. The cast album has only been out for a couple weeks, and the newness of it all makes it hit even harder. I also think where Hamilton is, it's a story of history. It is America now, but it's also America past, and that makes it feel very distant. Waitress feels very close and fresh, and I think kind of that increases how impactful it feels, for sure. Yeah, it was really, of the 16 times where I cried to myself during the Tony Awards, Waitress was one of them, for sure, absolutely. Oh, hello, chat. Hello, everyone. Hello, Megan. Hello, Danielle. How are we all doing today? I hope you're doing well. Megan asks, what do I think about movie to musical adaptations? How much creative license should be given to the story and or songs? That's one of the things that struck me a lot about this show. I was thinking about it in relation to Hairspray, because it's coming live to NBC in December, and that gives Hairspray a wonderfully weird journey of movie to musical to movie to live production. It follows, until the live production, the same journey as the producers, from movie to musical to movie again. And I would qualify both of those as good movie adaptations. I think one of the things that makes words are hard. When you go from one genre, from one artistic format to another artistic format, I think the essential question to ask is, what does this new artistic format bring to the message that the old one didn't, right? So if you're going from movie to musical, you have to look at the differences between those two executions and what the addition of songs, the addition of a live audience, the removal of an implied fourth wall, like we're in a theater together, what that is going to do to the story and the message you're trying to tell, and what that says about the whole thing. And I think those musicals I mentioned, the producers, Hairspray, and now Waitress, do a good job of taking advantage of the hallmarks of their art form. Waitress, the movie, which I had to look up again because, as I said, I fell asleep and didn't remember much of. But there is a lot of introspection to it. It's a story about this one woman considering her life and like the choices she's made and the choices she's going to make, and the whole thing is held together by narration from Jenna about her pies and the stuff she's writing down in the diary. And that sort of contextualization, I think, lends itself very well to the musical theater genre, right? Because in a world where you have more permission to break out into song and like sing your feelings, that stuff becomes more acceptable as far as an audience member is concerned, and it's not so jarring and removing from the story because it's part of the art form. And I think that's absolutely one of the things that made me like this musical more than I enjoyed the movie. Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say. And also, I was looking back, this, usually for shows of the month, and even just for shows of the week, they are musicals that I've been able to sit with for a little longer. Either they've existed for several years, if not decades, before I'm talking about them, or I've had at least a couple months to listen to them or get used to them or see them or know them. This show has only been on my mind for a couple weeks, and it's, I'm excited to tackle that challenge. I haven't seen it. Interestingly, a lot of the synopsises, a lot of the plot summaries online are vague, which is interesting to me because the film exists. I know the plot, you can look up the plot of the film on Wikipedia, but the plot of the musical, everything is just like a 3 or 4 sentence summary filled with mystery and vagaries. And I don't know, it's again, I wonder if these are intentional choices or just because it's so new, just like kind of things that have, they haven't thought about yet, they haven't had a chance to tie down, that sort of stuff. What else is going on? These are great questions. The I know you all watching right now can see the chat. People in the future can't see the chat, so we read the questions because it's like we're in school again, and you restate the question. Megan asks, "What do you think about Sara Bareilles' songwriting contributions to the musical?" I think it's fabulous. I hope Sara Bareilles works on more musicals, which is not an opinion I would have thought I would have had before. Especially in her interviews. You gotta look up her, the publicity interviews they did with her about this thing. She just seems so genuine and nice and honest and excited to be flexing her songwriting muscles in this new format. I'd love to see her interpretation of new things and her, come a little closer to the musical theater family. Speaking of the musical theater family, I think this is important to mention and is really cool. There's a lot of talk about the diversification of Broadway right now in a whole bunch of ways, and that's totally a loaded statement to begin with, and there's a whole bunch of unpacking to be done there. Waitress is very notable in that, the 4 at least top billed creative teams on it are all women. And this is something I think that's really interesting in musical theater, and also, full disclosure, I'm a white gay male, this is not my place, this is not my realm, but it is musical theater. A land that has been dominated by white gay males for decades. And unlike something, the world of Broadway, the world of musical theater, the world of musical creation is a very tight-knit club, and it's not one you really get invited to, right? There's not an overarching permission-giving institution that says, hey, you should come into our club. It takes a bunch of people working their way to the top and making it in, which I think is one of the reasons, which I know is one of the reasons why it has unfortunately been dominated by just one kind of narrative and one kind of voice over the past many years. A predominantly, lady-driven creative team is a wonderful thing to hit the musical theater stage. Please, more of this. Please, people like me need to start making room for everyone else. It's about time. And Waitress is wonderful that way. Fun Home broke new ground last year. It's wonderful signs that for whatever reason, Broadway is moving in some appropriately progressive directions. And with a show like this, I think it very much shows. It's always hard to talk about these things because I feel like I'm tiptoeing, and, I never want to, it's the internet. People will call you out for saying the wrong thing for any second, at all, just sideways, Tumblr, I know you're watching. I think a story like this would not feel as honest coming from male voices. A story of the, trials and tribulations of getting unexpectedly pregnant and being a woman stuck in an unsatisfying relationship, that, as written by a guy, is not genuine. And I would wager not a lot of guys would be able to write that kind of story for Broadway, for a movie, for anything. And so it's really important in that way that this musical has made it to the Broadway stage and is as successful as it has been. And it's important to acknowledge that. Acknowledgement over. What else? If Hamilton hadn't come out this year, do I think Waitress would have taken home some Tonys? Absolutely. I've talked about this when in the Hamilton show of the day, but Hamilton is reaching that uncool phase, that's for sure, and that's fine. That's what happens with things that are inordinately cool. They very quickly become uncool. I think definitely Jessie Mueller, her performance in everything is just fabulous, and she's a Chicago girl, which, go Chicago stuff. Sounds like a sports team thing, right? We need a sports team name for Chicago actors. I think it would have taken all sorts of stuff had Hamilton not been around. I do, and again, you're right, Danielle, it's hard not to talk about Hamilton at this point. I'm seeing more and more posts hit the blogo internet sphere saying things like, Hamilton did not deserve its 11 Tonys. I think Hamilton deserved its 11 Tonys. It is revolutionary in some interesting ways that Waitress was not. Waitress is a traditional book musical, definitely with a contemporary feel and a contemporary songwriting, but it is an A-B love story, mostly romantic comedy plot. That is nothing new to the musical theater stage. There's some little bits of it that are new and interesting, but as a whole, it's a great show. Don't get me wrong. Wonderfully solid, beautiful show. Not revolutionary and changing the game in the same way that Hamilton is doing. So I think Waitress would have, and is still a serious contender in a world of Hamilmania. And who knows, now that the Tonys are done, all of the main gang of Hamilton have announced that they're moving on to other projects, that's how the world works. If you had to do, if you work on a show and you do one part for a year, 8 performances a week of doing exactly the same thing for, a little less than 365 days, depending upon where your vacation, swing, and holiday time falls, that is really artistically draining. I say in defense as people are like, why, Lynn, must you leave Hamilton? Because so you can do other things. Same with Leslie, same with Pippa. They're all going on to great things. All right, Hamilton the everything. Hamilton the podcast, Hamilton the show of the month, Hamilton the everything. What else we got on here? Danny asks what song in her performances... I'm sorry, I'm behind in all this. Danny asks what songs in her performances from Waitresses stand out to you. I find myself listening to specific songs a lot too, Danny. Alright, I gotta bring up the track list too, because I definitely, I am always drawn to opening songs. I find I could write a thesis on it sometimes, but I find I am drawn to songs that fall in the same parts of shows. I feel like in the some way that some people have proclivity to specific musical genres, I feel like I am drawn to songs that serve specific purposes in different shows. I really like exposition songs. I really like patter songs. I really like 11 o'clock numbers. It's just something that shines on me, and I don't know if that... I feel like that says more about my own personal idiosyncrasies than it does about the specific songs in Waitress. But the whole what's inside sugar, butter, flour motif in this thing, I think, is just beautiful. I love opening up because it's just an opening song. And then, of course, the whole Dear Baby Used to Be Mine sequence and You Matter to Me. How can you not like those songs? And I can only, they're the sort of songs that I can only listen to a couple times because it's been... I listen... This may surprise you, but I listen to a lot of musical theater. And you'll notice, if you look at, general trends among musical theater, a lot of good songs in musical theater deal with really heavy subjects. Musical theater has this reputation as being fluffy and meaningless, which, I will spend my entire YouTube career trying to reverse. But, a lot of musical theater has really deep, sorrowful, emotional-filled motivations. And I listen to them from an academic, analytical standpoint. And, you can only listen to Javert jump off a bridge so many times and be emotionally affected by it. Eventually, you reach a point where you've analyzed it so much that it's just a character, it's just a song in your mind. And I've reached that point with a lot of musicals that I listen to, but something about the freshness and the newness and, the interesting sideways... I don't know, I'm still looking for the words about it. Something about Waitress gets me emotionally invested in a way that I haven't been for quite a couple shows. You know, Hamilton is the same way right now. I'm gonna take a drink every time Tommy mentions Hamilton. Don't. Bad idea. There was something, I wrote down a quote from Sara that really resonated with me about this. Like she was talking about She Used to Be Mine, and she said she felt like that song resonated with a lot of people because, quote, the idea of remembering the person you thought you thought you would become, and then having to reconcile that with the person that showed up. She thought that idea resonated with a lot of people. It absolutely resonates with me, and it's a really, you know, it's a difficult feeling to describe, so much so that it, like, even the words don't do the feeling justice. The song, in the context of the musical, with everything leading up to it and everything coming out of it, like, you have to see the whole thing to acutely and specifically experience that feeling in the particular flavor that this musical doles out. And it gets to me in a way that I enjoy. I was having this discussion with my boss, of all people, the other day. We both have this problem where we can't watch, like, drama on television, not for a reason you'd think, but, like, you know, everyone's talking about Orange is the New Orange is the New Black season is out, and, like, everyone's watching Game of Thrones, and they're things that I can't do. I can't watch these shows, not because they're bad, they're fabulous, but because I've spent so much of my time in art analysis world that it's difficult to break out of that. Oh, words. Like, it's difficult to remember to suspend your disbelief and stop looking at the episode of House of Cards like an English paper, and, you know, finding the tactics that the characters have and looking for the climax, and, you know, like, segmenting it up in that very analytical way. Like, that's just the way my brain gets into it, and it's not, you know, it becomes not work, but it feels more academic and less enjoyable, less pastime. And so whenever something gets to me, whenever something, like, can trick that emotional part of my brain into, like, sympathizing with the characters and getting it, well, it makes me sound like a, you know, cold, unmoving academic, but maybe that's true. Maybe I'm just a grumpy grown-up now. But whenever my brain flips that switch into, like, empathy mode, because of a piece of art, it's magical. It's like, you know, because I know I've spent so much time in this analytical world, when something just pushes that button just right, it's very special and very cool. And Waitress has definitely done that on a couple occasions. And, you know, it's also a musical about food. Well, who doesn't like a musical about food? Everyone gets a pie when they go to see the show. That's pretty cool, right? What else? Danny says that she's bragging about getting tickets to both Waitress and Hamilton about 2 weeks apart. So the ticket sales for Hamilton coming to Chicago opened yesterday. Was that yesterday? It's the photos they posted and the videos they posted. You gotta look them up online. Like, I want to see a comparison of people waiting in line to buy an iPhone and people waiting in line to buy Hamilton tickets. I bet you it's a close race in some places. And, like, all at Ticketmaster went down, and the online stuff, people ran into so many problems. And this to me is wonderful. We're a business. We're an art, but we're a business. And we can't do our art unless we do our business. And the fact that everyone is coming out in droves to see this art, to support this art, to support this genre, you know, it doesn't take a lot of connecting of dots to see how that bodes well for the future of musical theater. And we've reached a watershed moment. Whenever some college takes me back in for me to write my PhD in musical theater, I want to talk about how just over the past decade and a half, we've gone from like the dark ages of musical theater, like a world where we don't know if we're going to have enough shows to put in a revival or new musical category for the Tony Awards, to a point where there's 13, 14, 15 shows opening on Broadway a year, and it's a competition to see like which fabulous show is going to get recognition this year. Even just the fact that 2, 3, 4 years ago, Neil Patrick Harris's opening for the Tony Awards was "It's Not Just for Gays Anymore," which is in great taste and is still very funny. But this year's opening for the Tony Awards was "This Could Be You. It Doesn't Matter Who You Are." I think speaks volumes to how the audience for musical theater and the audience for Broadway theater is very rapidly and wonderfully expanding. That's just great. All sidebars. Sidebars. Yeah, I can't listen to the end of soundtracks either, Danielle. I do have this fun game where every once in a while on my iPod, I hit shuffle with all of my musicals, and it never really lasts for long because a musical is not the sort of thing you can listen to out of order, and who really wants to hear Goodbye Number 2 right next to the Second Midnight, like all the like minor songs and shows. But the ends of soundtracks, it's hard. It's hard to be, newsflash, YouTube person has stupid revelation about simple thing. It's hard to be an artist sometimes. Whine, cry. But to live in a world where you're expected to tap into like the core of your humanity and your deep inside emotions while still like every night over and over again consistently, like those two things are antithetical to each other. Or just to be a fan and to have to appreciate art that makes you sad and like maybe that'll be the name of my book. It's hard to listen to Sweeney Todd on the bus. Something like that, I saw a great, I'm sure it's easy to Google, but I saw a great webcomic today of someone listening. It's like, a guy is listening to Hamilton on his iPod, and like, I don't know what it's like. I'm not throwing away my shot is in the speech bubble. And then he has a thought bubble that says, I bet you they think I'm listening to normal people music, which same. Man, I am, Danielle, so excited about Natasha Peer and the Great Comet of 1812. Spoiler alert, and hopefully it'll come out soon. Next podcast is Natasha Peer and the Great Comet of 1812. It's kind of been spoiled a little bit already. Jimmy and I talked for so long about this show. If you haven't listened to this show yet, you should go listen to it right now. It is, I don't know if it will sweep quite like Hamilton did, but it is definitely going to be a contender at next year's Tonys. It's coming to Broadway. Josh Groban is going to be in it. A whole bunch of great people are going to be in it. And it is also new in interesting ways, to a point, and you'll listen to the podcast when it comes out, but to the point where I wonder if its transition to Broadway will be detrimental to it because it was so tied to the particular built environmental locations it originally played in. But more on that podcast soon once Tommy sits down and edits the podcast. Can I first world YouTuber problems, but like you record yourself talking for 4 hours and then you record yourself talking into a camera for 2 hours and then you go down and sit down in Starbucks and then have to listen to your stupid face babble over and over again. And it's a weird world. We live in a weird world. Everything's weird. Man, I'm jealous of all of you going to see stuff in New York. I wish I had that time in my life. If you're watching from New York and you want to charter a flight for me to go see all the Broadway shows out there, I will absolutely mention and talk about how much I enjoy your product on this stupid internet show I do. It's a promise from me to you. I'm not pandering. Who panders? I pander. What else did I write down on here? I have questions for you guys. This musical is so new. What are your favorite songs in this show? Do you think they should have waited to open the show until after April 28th to be in this next season? So if, let's say, Waitress waited until the April 28th cutoff to be in the 2016-2017 Tony Awards nominating season, they would be up against, what do we have now? The Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, the Monopoly musical. What else is coming out? There's a couple other things coming out. Like, I wonder if that would have benefited them, or if they, if they did it intentionally because they saw the things coming up and because they saw, like, I wonder. I just wonder. To be in the room where it happens. Take a drink. Did you see the newscast where they tried to sneak in Hamilton quotes as often as they could? Google it. It's fabulous. We live in a great world. Oh. Whew. It hasn't started hailing yet. Just letting you know. Although, and you may see this, I live in a tiny studio apartment, and I have to turn my air conditioning off when I do these sort of things, and it's like 80 degrees out today. So if you start seeing the drips pouring down my face, you'll know why. Danielle, I wish American Psycho would have lasted a little longer too. I wonder, in the moment research, I wonder what their production schedule was like. Like, I wonder what, they opened on the West End, and then they brought it straight to Broadway, and I feel like they should have given themselves more time and more flexibility to work on it. American Psycho is the kind of show that works very much on a psychological premise. They want to evoke a feeling in the audience. This is nothing new. This is Brecht-style theater. This is Sweeney Todd. You are watching something happen and reacting to it. You're not, like, taking yourself and putting yourself in place of the protagonist. And I think to that end they could have done more. We live in a whole new world of musical theater where you can do whatever, and I think American Psycho, of all things, stuck too much to the bread and butter layout of what a musical should be, and I think that was to its detriment. They could have gone much more creepy and much more psychological with their playing of it all. What do we got here? I think that's what I'm convincing myself of too, Danny. It says they opened at just the right time. While opening for the next season might have helped for the Tonys, I think the show would have lost momentum on the sales end. I think that's absolutely true. I bet you Waitress will stick it out probably for a couple more months, if not to the end of the year. I don't think it's the kind of show that plays on Broadway forever and ever and ever and ever. But, who knows what kind of show that is anymore. We're seeing Chicago just hit, it just dropped below 50% sales marks. Broadway's changing. Broadway's changing very fast. And Hamilton brought in the millennials, which is a term I have problems with, but, you know, another thesis. And that is changing what is going to be successful on Broadway, and there are a bunch of people making a lot of mistakes. I'm looking at you, Cats, the revival. Like, there are things that are coming to Broadway that are not going to be successful because Broadway audiences and musical theater audiences are changing. They are changing so rapidly because we live on the internet now, and because anyone can get excited about a piece of musical theater, not just old Aunt Sally who happens to, you know, own her $1 million high-rise apartment in New York. Like, kids can show up for the Ham for Ham performances and get involved and get excited, and that changes your audience, you know, to maybe to bring it back a little bit. I think that's one of the things that is very appealing about Waitress, is it is not a bread and butter piece of musical theater. You know, it's not Guys and Dolls, it's not She Loves Me, and nothing is wrong with those pieces of musical theater, but the age of their construction is showing. Not even the age of their content, which has shown for a while, but like just the genre of music and the style and the genre of plot construction, like very straightforward, very this then that and this then that. We're writing musicals now. Like we're in like a post-conceptual musical era, right? Where in the late 90s, early 2000s, there were a lot of, maybe earlier, maybe like 70s, 80s, 90s, because 90s, early thousands are the dark times. But there were a lot of like really high concept musicals where like there was a lot of art happening, and there was a lot of like, you know, it felt like performance art trickling just a little further back into the world of musical theater. And then we hit the dark ages of jukebox musicals and, you know, Susan Stroman productions. Susan Stroman's great. A lot of her productions. Now we're reaching the post-conceptual age where instead of like finding the deep-rooted performance metaphor of the problems of our age, we are like frankly and clearly discussing some of the middle-of-the-road difficult topics that average, everyday people have. Sometimes maybe veiled under, you know, more storytelling metaphor, sometimes outright. I'm pregnant and I don't want to be is not the sort of thing that is a very musical theater kind of topic. And like struggling with and juggling that subject. I think, how many times can I say I think in this episode? Can I say it more times than I say Hamilton? I think one of the things I like so much about Waitress the musical that I struggled with in Waitress the film is Waitress the musical gets right to it. I mean, what, song number 3 is the negative, which is just, I use the term pun, and I think that minimizes a little bit, but the love and adherence to wordplay in this musical is just fabulous. Like, it's like serious puns. It's like puns for art's sake. You know, it's the negative, and you're focusing on the negative, both in that it is the pregnancy test, but in that also, like, you're hoping for a negative outcome, and you know, the phrases focus on the positive, and that's funny. They get right to the exposition in this show, which that is a major pet peeve of mine. If we're in, like, song 6 or 7 of Act 1 and you haven't told me what the problem is in this show, I'm gonna have a problem with you. It's a problem I have with the SpongeBob musical. But I've already talked too much about that, that's for sure. Although, did you see the picture of Tina Landau in her yellow suit? It's fabulous. I think Tina Landau's fabulous. I thought the SpongeBob musical was enjoyable. Yeah, I already talked a lot about it, but I do want to give you all this picture of Tina Landau if I can find it. Da, 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 da. Nope, not gonna happen. I'll tweet it later. It'll be great. Someone remind me. You meant to tweet a picture of Tina Landau in a yellow suit. Yes, I did. Also, if you're watching this in the future and you recognize me at SpongeBob the Musical and you said hi, nice to say hi to you. Send me a Twitter message or something. I want to say hi to you back. All right, announcement's done. Sometimes I make farty noises with my mouth. High quality content. Thank you all for watching. Oh man, I was trying earlier today to explain this to my mother. I used to describe Musical Theater Mash as my secret musical theater YouTube channel because I know you all know about this, but in my everyday non-internet life, it's not an easy subject to bring up or kind of talk about, and it feels very narcissistic when you talk about it, but it's obviously slowly come out of the bag, and my friends have been a part of some of my videos now, and it's great, and my mother now watches my videos. Hi, Mom, and I think that's wonderful, but it was interesting to try to explain to her the idea of live streaming and like talking to people on the internet live, and she's like, why is this a thing you do? And I was like, well, it's fun. It's, yeah. Those mothers, they're great. They're what make this musical. Technology everywhere. I got a lot of technology. There's like a huge tape recording deck over here, and there's a whole robot over here. He's got like arms, and he's like beep, boop, 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 beep, and he's holding up my cue cards. Actually, all of this I say is scripted. Even the thing I'm saying right now is scripted on these cue cards being held up by the robot. Even this is scripted, and this is scripted, and this is scripted. How's that for a title show moment for you? Man, totally lost the plot. This has just been fabulous. I love this musical. I really like Waitress the musical, and I did not expect to. It's not that often I think I'm surprised by musicals like that, which also sounds very narcissistic to say. But like it's hard to break out of your predetermined notions of something, right? You hear about the existence of something like Monopoly the musical, or SpongeBob the musical, or School of Rock the musical, or whatever, and you have all these pre-established notions. And I think one of the things, really, and I think this is thanks to you, internet people, in keeping me honest, is you have to find a way to break through those predetermined notions of how you're going to feel about something. And like find the ways to take that step back and remember, that you can change your mind on a piece of art. And that also, like, we do musical theater, all of this is important to us, for sure, but in the grand scheme of things, whether or not a musical is successful, we should celebrate the successes and mourn the losses, and that's where it should end. I agree, Danny. Danny says SpongeBob the musical was enjoyable. It needs work, which will be difficult, but it has the potential to be fun. And Squidward. That's all. Squidward is fabulous in SpongeBob the musical. Whew. I think... Oh, wait. I wanted to... Alright, so I got this new piece of software, and I promised I was going to use this thing. I haven't quite found the moment to use it yet. But here, if I click this button...
Stop taking pictures right now!
Oh, man. I love technology. It's a brave new world we live in. That was mostly for me. If you enjoyed it, I hope you enjoyed it too. I also say that because it's time for me to do the ending reminder that if you stumbled upon this thing in the future and you want to be a part of future ones, click the annotation that I'll put around this thing. Join. Oh, can I line this up? join my, oh no, that's this hand. That's hard to do. Join my Patreon. Only if you want to, only if you have the means to. But you can be a part of these things live. You can help pick the show. I babble about for however long, and you know, you can be a part of the chat where we get off track and talk about SpongeBob the Musical and all that fun stuff. So, you know, as usual, thank you all so much for watching. I love doing these things. I know sometimes we get off track. I know sometimes we run out of things to talk about, but that's fun too. I've got another one that everyone is invited to on Friday. Come to the Hangout. There'll be a link on Twitter. You all should come. It's going to be a grand old time. It's going to be really stupid. I'll see you next time. Have a great day.